Well, that was weird. All right. Hello, everybody. Let me adjust this a little bit. All right. Here we go. This is number 144, I think. Something like that. Um, we've got questions already. Woohoo! So, and I will get to, there's a question on the WhatsApp that we'll answer. Let me open that up so that I don't forget. From Joshua. All right, so let's start with Cardo. Hello, Cardo. Nice to see you. Cardo says, hey, hello, Eddie and Trumpet friends. I am trying to incorporate the 3 levels of rest into my practice. Do you advise taking the day off after a heavy day or after a light day, or is it irrelevant? Um, I'm going to give you a wishy-washy answer. And the reason why I'm going to do that is because it really does depend. So, if you're struggling, if you're in a place, because last week you were told us that things weren't going so well, and if you're struggling, I would go with putting it after the day after well, how did you a heavy day. Now, when you say heavy day, I'm assuming that what you're talking about is you have a bunch of rehearsals, a bunch of performances, you have a really loud gig or whatever, and what you're looking at doing is um, uh, incorporating your 3 days of rest to match your demands that you have on the horn, right? If that's what you're saying, and you've been struggling, then yes, you want to coordinate that so that your heavy day is the day that you um uh what am I saying? The day off should come after your heavy day. You should do that. Now, why am I saying it's wishy-washy? Because I've told a lot of students to do the opposite of that. They say they've got band on one night and the rehearsals on the other night. I say that shouldn't matter, but they're not struggling. Okay, so when you're struggling, you need to cut back like that. And what do I mean by cut back? Sometimes I say the words and I realize, you know what? Nobody's gonna know what I'm talking about. What I mean by cut back. So if you have a heavy performance and you keep business as usual, that's gonna be a big, heavy day. You know, this worked for me personally because the stuff that I did when I was making those advances in my chops, the stuff that I did publicly was not very sensitive. I'm talking about stuff like salsa gigs and stuff like that. If I have a salsa gig, uh, and what would often happen is I'd have my heavy practice day, a wedding reception, and then at midnight go after the wedding reception, go to uh, a salsa gig after that. And I would do my full day's practice before those two. That's another 8 hours worth of gigs after a full day's worth of practice. That's how I used to do it. But the stuff I was playing in public was not sensitive. So if I kind of cracked this note and kind of had a fuzzy sound on that note, it didn't really matter that much. The way the PA is turned up and all that stuff, it's not that sensitive. So I could get away with that. If I was an orchestral player, probably not. If I was doing mostly brass quintet gigs, probably not. If I was playing mostly church orchestra, probably not. I probably wouldn't have done that. So um, it sounds wishy-washy because it's contextual. But yes, one of the most important contexts that we want to take into account for this contextualness, I think I just made up a word, um, is whether you're struggling or not. Now, if I was struggling with, so when do you struggle, right? You struggle when you've gone to a new level. We all of us, I struggled. Every student I've ever had that went to the next level, they all struggled for the first month, for the first 2 months, sometimes it's 3 months. Okay. So that's what I mean by struggling. We've just increased the level and everything is hard. And in your case, playing on a new mouthpiece, that's going to be one of the things that causes a struggle. All right. So I hope that answers your question. Javier says, hello, Eddie and trumpet players. I hope you are all doing great. I am. Thank you. I have some questions. Do you recommend spending more time on the keys that are the weak ones? For example, playing music in those keys. No, I do not recommend that. I recommend, and where does that come from? There's a philosophy that I got from my brother. Many years, decades later, I told my brother that I got it from him, and he didn't remember it, and he was actually kind of flattered that this came, that something that was such a big part of my life came from him. Right? So he taught me how to work out with weights, which I need to get back into. I have a weight set in the back and I don't use it. But yes, he was helping me work out with weights, and I noticed that my pecs were two different sizes. I have a bigger pec on the left than I do on the right. I asked him, does that mean, and you'll see how this relates, right? Does that mean now that I have to do more reps on this side, or that I need to, on this side, or more weight on this side? He says, no, if you want it to even out, here's the wisdom that he gave me. If you want it to even out, you do more on both sides. Right? And I live according to that wisdom today as much as I can. If you want it to even out, do more with both. Now, in this case, we're talking about keys. So we want to be organized about the keys. So we're talking about the music, right? Instead of practicing just the same songs that are always in the same key, we want to introduce tunes that have, because I know you're doing the jazz stuff, there's enough tunes to cover all the keys. Some of the keys are a little bit more rare, like the key of D concert, our E is a little bit more rare. The key of A flat with the G flat concert, that's a little bit more rare. But there are tunes that have that. You can also take other tunes and transpose them into that key. I actually have a list of songs that I do when so all of my technique work is key centric. And I do all of this stuff. I have like a list of things I do in each key. And then I just go on to the next key, on to the next key. I won't say what I was just thinking. Anyway, so I actually have, I think, about 6 or 7 tunes that I play in every key, not the way people think. Not the way people think. They, I played in a band one time in El Paso where we played the blues in C, and then we did it in D flat, and then we did it in D, and then we did it in E flat, and then E and F. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is you do all of those tunes, starting with that one that I always start people with, the Autumn Leaves. We do all those tunes, Autumn Leaves in C, and then the next one we do is Black Orpheus in C with A minor. Then I have a list of about 7 or 8 tunes. I said 6 or 7 earlier. Of songs that I'm going to do in every key. In that key, I'm sorry, I keep correcting myself. Songs that I do in that key before I go on to another key. And I do that along with other exercises mixed in. All of them are in that key. So that's me exercising that concept that my brother taught me, that if you want to be even in every key, you do more on all of them. Just so, like, if I was a classical player, what? Let me reword that. This must not be a good thinking day. I am a classical player. I shouldn't be saying if I was. Eh, What I meant was if I was working with a classical player, I would tell that classical player to avoid books, etude books that don't use all the keys. Let's say someone who's in high school comes to me and they have time. So this gets kind of weird. That's why I said if. A lot of times, someone who's in high school, all we ever do is work on their music. That's not good trumpet lessons, but that's how it ends up being. So that's why I'm using the word if. If I'm working with a serious classical player that says, hey, do you know what? I've got the band music, I've got all that stuff worked out. Let's learn trumpet. I'm going to say, okay, let's get the Herbert L. Clark characteristic studies because it goes through all the different keys. Let's go to, the number of etude books that actually go through all the different keys is actually kind of rare. It's actually kind of rare. That was the first one that comes to my head. There are some others, but I can't remember what they are. And Javier's second question is, and what is the mouthpiece brand or model with the roundest, more bite? So I wouldn't use more bite. I would say that's less bite if it's rounder, because the opposite of round is going to be square. And it's when we talk about bite, we're talking about that corner right there digging into the lip. So when we say bite, we're talking about a sharper corner. At least that's how I see it. Okay. So a more round rim will have less bite. That's my perspective on that. I think the roundest rim, if to my knowledge, is the Shoki. In fact, when you say 14A4A, one of those letters, I don't remember which one of those letters is talking about how sharp or rounded that curve is on the mouthpiece. So they give you that option. Hello, Karen. Karen, nice to see you. Um, hello, Jeffrey. Nice to see you. Hello, Raimo. Nice to see you. Okay, let's talk about this Joshua's question. So some of you have the WhatsApp, so you would have seen the image that he put in there. I'll hold it up so that you can see it. And his question is, does the sharp apply to only the bottom notes or also the top notes? And once again, I'm going to be wishy-washy, okay? It depends on the context of the music. In the old days, and I'm estimating about 30 to 50 years ago and older, that would have been yes. The answer would have been yes, that sharp applies to all octaves. Okay? That used to be the answer. Somewhere along the way, around 50 to 30, 50, maybe 70 years ago, I keep forgetting we're 20 years already into this new century. So I should have been saying 50 to 70 years ago, to my recollection, they stopped doing it that way. So we have a lot of our literature that's out there, that rule stays. You look at the music and that sharp will apply to every octave that the music comes in. The more modern music is not written like that, does not follow that rule. So the modern music says that only applies to that octave. If you want sharps in the top octave, you have to put a sharp on that octave. It makes it kind of frustrating makes it kind of complicated because you have to be aware. You know, it's a half step off. If it sounds wrong, it's probably wrong, right? So for most tonal music, the answer is going to be kind of obvious. Okay, I hope that makes sense. For most music, tonal music. Now, where you might have difficulty is in the avant-garde, more atonal music. Then you don't have the same context of what the harmonic context where it's clearly a wrong note. In that avant-garde music, it's not so easy to be sure that it's a wrong note. So then you have to really do your homework. If it's modern, if it's in the last since the 80s, then it's for sure going to be uh, that the sharp on the one octave does not apply to the other octave. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Hello, Charles. Charles says, 2 weeks ago you said something that I have been thinking about. You said that once you have the strength to play a high C, it does not take much more to go above high C. That's correct. I routinely play the chops pro up to C and C sharp, but going above that takes much more effort. I am thinking that maybe I'm not playing the C and C sharp properly because I cannot go above that easily. That's not what I meant. Okay? That's not what I meant. Okay? The reason it's hard, it's not more difficult physically. Like when I say physically, I'm talking about like muscularly, to play the notes above C and C sharp. It's more difficult mentally. It's more difficult to get exactly the right uh, opening in the aperture, exactly the right jaw position. Well, that's what I mean by mental, by the way, because it's so subtle. Once you get to high C and above, the difference between one note and the other one becomes so extremely subtle. And this is where a lot of range stuff breaks down. Is we think it takes more effort. It does not take more effort. What it takes is more time. We need more time experiencing those notes. So that's why the routine goes all the way up to high C and C sharp. And it does it for the long tones, it does it for the lip slurs, it does it for the scales, it does it for all those different exercises so that you become more familiar with that register. You know, sometimes it's very difficult to get people to change their thinking on that. For me as a teacher, um, if we're looking at the difference between high C and high D, the difference between the C and the D is so extremely subtle. It's one of those things I can't tell you what it feels like because I can't even feel the difference. When I play D, I can't feel a discernible difference between D and C. It's so the difference from C to D is so minute. I can feel the air in my mouth change. I can feel that. But as far as the jaw, the lip pressure, the lip firmness is what I meant. The tongue arch, how hard I'm pushing from here. It's almost for someone who doesn't play up there, who doesn't have the familiarity with those notes. If it if for me, someone who does this, right? Someone who plays in those registers quite often and does it confidently most of the time, right? I can't feel the difference. I have to trust my subconscious. A lot of words aren't coming out today. I have to trust my training and my subconscious that this is going to happen the way it's supposed to. I can't make that note come out. I hope that makes sense. So it's not that you're not doing the C properly. It's just that spending more time on that, and there is this aspect of, I hate to say this too, right? Because there's when someone else hijacks a term, now when we use that term, it takes on a different meaning from what we are actually intending. And what a lot of people are teaching today is this relaxation nonsense, right? Um, there is an element of relaxation that has to happen for those notes. If you're still struggling to get the C, then it's not that you're not playing the C well enough. It's that you're overthinking the C. If you have to work hard to play high C, then it's not that the C is not good enough. It's that you're putting too much into it. Cardo says, Eddie, what do you think about the exercises to increase the register at the very beginning of the Top Tones book by Walter Smith? I don't remember what that has. Let me grab the book real quick. Oh, almost fell. Oh, let's see here. Top tones at the beginning. Oh, it's like an expansion thing, kind of. Weird fingerings. At least for that, the page 6 is kind of a weird fingering. Yeah, this is an expansion thing. I don't have a problem with the expansion stuff. I really don't. I think this should, you know, that my stuff is always expansion. Um, so I don't have a problem with the expansion stuff, really. Um, that said, the expansion stuff is incorporated into the routine the way I do it. And I'm not a big fan, you guys know this already. I'm not a big fan of range exercises. And that looks like basically a range exercise. And a lot of the range exercises are expansion exercises. I don't like the idea of working on range as a separate, we have flexibility, we've got tone, we've got endurance, and then they put as something to work on range. And when my observation has been that when you work on range as a aspect of trumpet playing, that's when things start getting weird, because like what we're talking about here, instead of going for a familiarity approach, the range exercises treat range development like it's a physical effort thing. Like the harder you try, the higher the notes go. It's not like that. It's not like that. The higher you go, the more subtle the movements are. Maybe movements is the wrong word. The more subtle the changes are. It becomes so incredibly subtle that, so what I was demonstrating before was just a whole step at high C. What about the octave above that? Going from super C to D above super C is even more subtle than what I was showing you before. I hope that makes sense. Charles says, That is what I was thinking. I just need to keep practicing and eventually it will come. It seems that if you are playing C properly, the D will come out on its own. And that's one of the questions we had last week, I believe, if I'm not remembering this incorrectly. If I'm remembering it correctly, it's a funny word day. Uh, we talked last week about when is it time to move on, right? And that's one of the things I'm looking for is when you shoot for the C and a D or an E comes out on accident. That's a good indication. And when I say by accident, so I've had students that like they're doing the lip slurs, right? And just very easily knock it off into the E above high C on accident with a nice clean pure tone. When that happens, that's a big sign that you've got that that familiarity that we're looking for. Cardo says, Eddie, your high register is so amazingly effortless. Well, that's well. First of all, thank you. Um, there are some problems with my upper register, especially now since COVID. I used to play a lot of loud high gigs, and that's gone away over the last few years, and I don't practice loud and high at home. So what I have now in the upper register is like piccolo trumpet chops. I had a recording session on Tuesday, and it was all improv stuff. But I thought, let me give her a couple of times through on the upper octave, and I couldn't believe how washed out my sound was in that register. So I immediately came home and started practicing those notes like I used to. Once again, combining it with my so what I was practicing yesterday was my technique stuff. So like I told you, I do all these different tunes in that key. So right now my key is 4 sharps, the key of E. And I was taking all my licks up an octave like I would always do in the past. Just to get that back. That has been my bread and butter all these years. Yes, they like that I improvise, and that's probably one of the reasons because there's plenty of people who play high notes. So I've been told many times over that the reason I get the gigs I get is because I've got the high note chops and I've got the jazz improv. I've got both of those things. In today's age, they want someone that can do all of that stuff. So I get those gigs because I've got the chops and I've got the jazz, the improv. Um, so and if it wasn't for the lead chops, I would not have had a career because if you think about it, I'm a nobody trumpet player, and I know people don't like to hear that. They think I'm being falsely humble, but it's the truth. I'm not famous for anything. I'm, there's I know this is a tangent on a tangent, but I've always striven to be, there's a difference between popular and highly regarded. And I've never really cared about popularity. I don't care if a whole bunch of people like me or not. I've never cared about that. What I care about is whether or not people can trust me to hire me. Like as a teacher, right? I want my students to trust me that if we work on this, it's going to actually get done. That I actually know how to help them get where they want to go. That's not popular. That's highly regarded. Popular is the guy you invite to your party because you like the way he cuts jokes and stuff like that. But, highly regarded means that, hey, we need someone to get the job done and you're the best guy for the job. I would much rather have that. So, and I think that when we talk about famous players, I think there's a lot of now. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that I'm better than the famous guys. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that if you hire me for whatever it is that I make myself available for, the job's going to get done. The job is going to get done. And that's how I am with the talking about the range, getting the tangents back to where we were at. Um, that's how I feel about the range. It's just part of the job. I've never liked high notes. That's the funny part, right? I don't even like the stuff. If I have a choice, I won't play high notes in a performance. I only play high notes in a performance if it's appropriate. I'm not one of those guys that has to take stuff up an octave. I've never been one of those. I think it actually sounds terrible to take stuff up an octave. I think the number of times I've taken. So if I'm going to take something up an octave, it's only because it's appropriate to do so. So yes, I don't even like the high notes. So that's kind of funny, isn't it? I have better range. That's the funny part, the irony. I have better range than a lot of the high note guys. And I don't consider myself a high note guy. So, all right. Any other questions? Let me check. Since we have the phone thing going, the WhatsApp, I can keep an eye on that too. If you guys want to ask questions that way, like if you want to ask the before the Q and A starts, you can do it that way. Any other questions? You know, Charles, there are some ways to further that along to get it to be to reach that point sooner. And one of those ways, one of the things you want to do is incorporate in your music, incorporate dynamics in that register. Now that's kind of hard to do. And what I mean by hard to do, I don't mean hard to play. It's of course it's hard to play. Um, what I mean by hard to do is it's kind of hard to find music that's appropriate with, where you're playing a high C and it's getting softer and louder, and then louder and softer back and forth. It's hard to find music where that's appropriate. Now, what you can do is write a piece of music or take something up an octave that has that. But why am I saying that dynamics in the upper register will help get you there sooner? Because when you play dynamics up on that note, the subtle changes that have to happen for you to play the notes higher and lower is the same as the subtle changes that have to happen to get louder and softer. So if you're going to play a melody that goes up to high C, and you crescendo and then bring it back down, the amount of control it takes to do that well is the same exact control it takes to go to that D and the E above it. So one way to hurry this along is to find music that maxes out at the high C, that gives you enough time on the high C to add some dynamics to it. Why am I saying that in the context of music? If you do this as an exercise, it's not the same. If I just gave you an exercise, notice that my exercises don't have dynamics. I want those exercises to be mezzo forte to forte in that range between mezzo forte and forte all the way through, because that gives you the proper mechanics. Now go to your music. And the music should have fluctuating dynamics. Your music should have all this other stuff that the exercises don't have. There's a very clear border between the two. We do not want to mix our exercises with our music. So when we're talking about adding dynamics, that really should be. There are some exceptions, but that really should be something that you do in a musical context. No, see, that's what I'm saying. So Charles says, so add dynamics to my Chops Pro as well. No, don't do that. Keep the yeah, so that's what I'm saying. Don't do that on Chops Pro. Do not do that. You know what you can do is get a Conconi exercise and do it up an octave or something. I call it an exercise, Conconi etude. Let me pull a Conconi out and see what the range is on a Conconi. I'll pull that out real quick. Now, I like this Conconi book where they're all in one book. This is my favorite Conconi book. And so you're more likely to find something that fits what we're talking about here. So here's, nope, that's too high. Too high, too high. So maybe not Conconi, but something like that. You could even take, for that matter, a piece that was written for junior high and take it up an octave. I heard, in fact, that reminds me, I heard that's what Maynard Ferguson did. Let's look at the Arbin book. I heard that Maynard took some of these in the art of phrasing back here and took them up an octave. Is that before the duets or after the duets? I can never remember. Okay, it's before the duets. So if you can find an art of phrasing that goes up to C in the staff, that might be hard to do too. That's what I said. It's gonna be hard. It's not hard to do it. It's hard to find music that will help you do it. Because all of this goes above C. So really you would almost have to take a piece of music that was written for beginners and take it up an octave. Because I'm not seeing, even in the art of phrasing, almost everything goes at least up to D. But you get my point, right? Now, what you could do is sections of a piece of music. So I hear one, the Black Eyed Susan. You could do just the first phrase. Oh, I'm sorry, two phrases. And then after you've learned it down an octave, you can take it up. So in this case, what we're doing is trying to play that high C softly. You know, before I told you adding dynamics so that you get louder and softer, but just doing dynamics up there so that in this case, that first high C is going to be a soft high C. I tried to crescendo it because I was thinking the other way. If you practice something like that up in the upper register, then that's going to give you greater control over those notes. Now, here's the thing. If you can't play the high C's soft like that, if that's not possible, then you should try the dynamics a little lower than that. And in that case, then yes, you can go to the Conconi stuff. You can go to the Arbans and play it the way it is, because it will go up to B flat, it'll go up to A, it'll go up to G. You'll have plenty of music for that. And just make sure you're playing the dynamics, not just loud for the high notes. So let's do one more look at the Arban and see if something goes up to A or B flat. Now, it has to be from the section of the Arban that is musical, and that's so that can include the duets, that can include the etudes at the end, but it does not include all the exercises in the first half of the book. Okay, all of that stuff is just exercises. You don't do dynamics on exercises. So let me look at the art of phrasing and see if there's anything that pops out that goes up to A or B flat. Because if you, and this is just hypothetical, if you struggle with the high C being able to play it softly with control, then you're going to want to have, well, here's one that goes up to B flat from Verdi. Okay. All right, so, and I'm going to the end of it. So that's a perfect example of what I'm talking about. I'm putting vibrato. I'm putting phrasing. Phrasing includes dynamics. Okay, so if you play like that in that register and learn that kind of dynamic control, musical control, those kind of subtleties, then that D will start to pop out because it's the same control. It's the same control. I hope that makes sense. So Cardo says, if I try to do that crescendo, my high C will crack. That's what we're working on. That's what I said earlier. The same control it takes to go from C to D is the same control it takes to go high C, soft to loud. It's the same thing. So you should be practicing. Now, I know a lot of people would say, okay, well, give me an exercise. A lot of people do this with exercises. I disagree with that. But there are, if you have to do that and there's no other way to do it, then that's what I say, go for the exercise. Okay? Charles says, keep the same dynamic up and down the scale. That is what I do now. That's correct. That's how it should be done. Charles says, well, I spend a lot of time above the staff. However, it wants to be loud. That's what I'm saying. I'll work on more dynamics up there. That's what I'm saying. That's the first step to getting to moving on to that next level, is learning the control that it takes to play those notes softly. I should have said that last week. Maybe I did say it last week and I forget. Hello, Jess. Nice to see you. Jess says, hello, Eddie. I am now in college and I am in many ensembles that have notes that go up to my range, and my chops get fatigued every day. My range and endurance have decreased. Will my chops ever get better? or will they keep getting worse? You have to grab every moment that you can. This is all of this stuff that I teach today, all of it goes back to when I crashed and burned in college. If it hadn't been for that crash and burn, and I crashed and burned because of all those ensembles. At the time I was in the El Paso Symphony, I was in the El Paso Youth Symphony, I was so a total of 12 ensembles that met at least once a week. Some of them met 5 times a week. 12 ensembles. So I was not getting any rest ever. And so now, am I saying that's what's going to happen to you? No, that's not what I'm saying. That's the nice thing about how life works. You can stand on the wisdom of the people who came before you. But I will say this, you have to find a way to incorporate rest. You have to find some way to get some rest in there. Or yes, you will follow that same pattern that I did. I was doing rehearsals from like 9 or 10 in the morning until 4 or 5 in the afternoon every day, except for the weekends. And the weekends it was all the other oh, and by the way, the professional stuff always rehearsed in the evening. Um, so if it was not for that, now I don't regret it because I wouldn't be the teacher that I am today if it had not happened to me. But all this stuff that I figured out was because I had to figure something out or just not play anymore. And the resting thing is a big part of that. So it's important. Now, one of the things you want to do is make sure that the horn is off of your face every minute that it can be off the face. I'm talking about in the rehearsal. If you're in a rehearsal and there's 3 beats of rest, then you take the horn off your face for that 3 beats. If you have to massage your lips for that 3 beats, well, maybe if you've got 2 measures, massage your lips for that 2 measures. Now, if you're a muscular trumpet player and not a inflammation based trumpet player, if your embouchure is muscular based instead of inflammation based, then it can help to do pedal tones after every rehearsal. Just like a little, I'm not a big believer in warm down, but in a case where you never get rest, doing pedal tones is a second alternative to best to that, if that makes sense, to resting. Playing pedal tones and lip bends for that matter, but pedal tones more. Pedal tones after your rehearsal will help sort of massage the lips and get the blood flowing back through there again. And the same thing is true because if you're in college, that means you have responsibilities to practice your lesson music and stuff like that. Same thing with that. When your practice session is over, do some pedal tones. Now, the pedal tones I'm talking about in that context are not the ones that we do in the routine. I'm not talking about this kind of pedal tone. Right? I'm talking about the other kind where you just play a low note. That kind of pedal tone. Already I can feel it. My lips are tingling. You can play melodies and stuff like that down there, but it's not necessary. It's an exercise to help flush the blood back through the lips again. The purpose of this kind of pedal tone is to massage your lips. And it helps, it's sort of like a athlete getting a massage after working out. that kind of thing, right? Or they get on that machine that has the belt that goes back and forth. It's sort of like that. So at the end of your practice session, do that for about 2 or 3 minutes. At the end of your now they call this a warm down. Like I said, I'm not a big fan of warm downs. I would rather just stop playing. But if there's a problem with swelling and stuff like that, because that's usually what the problem is, right? Usually you end up getting swollen, and then you start the next rehearsal already swollen. And then you're almost forced into this other way of playing that's not muscular. So the most important thing is to get that swelling to go down. I'm almost finished writing the next book in the Chop series. All I have to do is finish the text side of it, and then my wife has to finish the cover. But I've been playing through it on a regular basis now, and it actually makes me less tired than the Chops Pro book. And the reason it makes me less tired, even though it's longer and higher, the reason it makes me less tired is it's got a whole bunch more pedal tones. The pedal tones go lower, like this range that I'm talking about here. The pedal tones go lower, and there's more of them. They're spread throughout all the exercises. And so I'll get to the end of that routine, and I'll be more fresh than I am when I'm finished with the Chops Pro. That's how significant the pedal tones are for that kind of thing. Okay, so in this case, now let me also emphasize the difference between these pedal tones. The other pedal tones that we've been talking about here are the ones where you play the fingering that corresponds with the octave above, because that forces you to do aperture control, to use aperture control. I'm not doing it the way it should be. So those exercises are meant to teach you aperture control. This other exercise, it's a different embouchure. You're doing like a duck embouchure, right? That has an entirely different purpose. That's meant to massage your lips. And it doesn't matter what fingerings you're using, nothing like that. That's not for the purpose of becoming a better player. That's for actually massaging your lips. Now, the routine has both of those. In the pedal tones, the pedal tones in the long tone exercises are more like that. And it's like that for a reason, because we want to have that little massage action going before we get to the high notes, before we get to the scales and the lip slurs. Okay. All right. Very good. Any other questions? We've got enough time for maybe one or two more questions. You're welcome, Jess. Any other questions? Well, I guess we'll sign off then, unless something comes in real quick. Oh, Nikochas says, any advice on getting a dry mouth when getting nervous? Yes. That was my symptom. Whenever I used to get nervous, I would get a terrible, terrible dry mouth. The the thing that worked the most was to make sure, this is gonna sound like I'm overstating the obvious. If you stay properly hydrated beforehand, maybe even overhydrated. I used to drink a whole gallon of water before I went to my performances. Okay, if you stay properly hydrated, uh, that can help a lot. And then the other thing is, I used to chew. I don't have to do this anymore. That's wonderful, right? I used to chew gator gum. So gator gum is a gum. Let me see if they still sell that. I'll bet they do. Yes, they still. Oh, it's called Quench gum. It's Gatorade in a gum. Oh, it's so that is Quench gum. That's confusing. Let me open this. So I used to put one of these in my mouth, halfway chew it. You don't want to chew it so much that the the chemicals come out. Halfway chew it. I guess gator gum is a thing of the past now, but it's an electrolyte gum. And I would chew it and put it under my tongue. Oh, not under my tongue. I'm sorry. I would put it in my cheek, and that would help keep me salivated through the performance. Now, the biggest thing with nerves, so yes, that's what I have to say about the dry mouth, but that's just putting a band-aid on it. What we prefer is to not get nervous. And in my teaching, my history as a teacher, in my history as a teacher, I have discovered that most of the students that get nervous because of their behavior when they're practicing. And let me show you what I mean. Let's say I'm practicing, practice, 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 and I make a mistake and I go, oh, I hit myself. I used to always hit myself in the leg when I practiced. So I'm speaking this from experience. And you make a mistake, you get frustrated, you hit something. In my case, it was always my leg. I had a student one time that almost got kicked out of the band because in all region, he got so angry he hit the stand and it went flying. And his band director said was about to kick him out of the band for his behavior. Now, what's this have to do with getting nervous? I believe that if you practice, now you can watch. I have a whole series of videos about this. Look on YouTube, Eddie Lewis, um, stage fright. I think is if you search for those words, Eddie Lewis stage fright, my stage fright series should come up. And one of the things I talk about is what I call stoic practice. When you practice, you do not respond to your playing emotionally. You get rid of all that. Stop doing it. And I have a theory based on my experience doing this and watching other students. I have a theory that the reason why we have these temper tantrums when we're practicing is to prove to everybody that we care. And amongst, we being part of everybody, we want to prove to ourselves and prove to anyone who might be watching that we care so much about how good this is that, oh, that's not good enough. That's not good enough. And we hit and we stomp and we have all these, what I call musical temper tantrums. I believe that the reason people get nervous is because that's how they practice. Think about it. If that's how you practice, how are you going to turn that off when you get on stage? If that's how you practice, how do you turn that off? You can't turn that off. Practicing works the way that old saying, you are what you eat, works. How you practice is how you perform. Let that sink in. I'm going to say it again. How you practice is how you perform. You cannot do it differently. So, caring so much that you have to have temper tantrums in your practice session is an automatic, I'm going to be nervous on stage. It's automatic. You're asking for this nervous stuff to happen. It's nice to have a way to fix the dry mouth, but wouldn't it be better to just not get nervous in the first place? And think about it. Think about it from this perspective. If you don't allow yourself to have these emotional outbursts when you're practicing, and let's say you practice 2 or 3 hours a day, you're getting 2 or 3 hours a day of practice, not letting your emotions affect your performance. By the time you get on stage, Karen says, "Can I roll my eyes?" Uh, technically, if what I'm saying is true, then no, you shouldn't even do that. The thing is, I still have every once in a while, I still have one of those times where I'll grunt or whatever. I don't hit myself anymore. I don't scream, I don't holler, none of that stuff anymore. That's what I call it stoic practice. Stoic in the sense that you're not letting the emotions interfere with your practice time. And when you make a mistake, it doesn't mean that the mistakes are okay. But when the mistake happens, it's just business. The mistake happens. You know you need to do it 10 times. You missed the third time. Well, that one doesn't count. It's just business. You're going to do now another 6 times or whatever. Oh, that's bad math. Another 7 times. Okay? There's no need to have those emotional outbursts. Now, I don't know uh, I don't know anything about you. You're asking about the dry mouth. I don't know anything about you. Chances are that that's how you practice. Chances are that's how you practice. You get it wrong and you have some sort of fit, some sort of emotional reaction. The way I like to look at this, the emotion should go into the music and not into the process. I'm going to say that one more time for clarity. The emotions should go into the expression of the music, not into the practice process. There should be no emotion in the practice process. And when I say no emotion, I include in that passion. Oh, I'm going to get this done. I'm going to be great. No, none of that. Just get the job done. Does that make sense? Just get the job done. You have a job to do. You know you have to do these steps to get through the piece. You know you need to do these steps to get your chops built up. You know you have steps that you have to follow. Just follow the steps. If there's a mistake, fix the mistake with no emotional reaction whatsoever. That's what I call stoic practice. And then when you start playing music, you can take whatever frustration that you have and pour that into your playing. I like to think of the playing, the expression part of your playing as a safety valve, because for as long as I can remember, people have been bottling up what am I saying? People have been saying don't bottle up your emotions because you'll explode. I don't actually believe that's true, but let's say it's true. This is a beautiful way to counteract that, because when you do play music, you can take all of that emotion and pour it out. I hope that makes sense. He says, that's a good point of view to have. It seems like I'm either extremely nervous or extremely passionate. That's what I'm saying. Turn that off, man. Turn that off. Turn that off. Dial it down. The passion comes in the decisions that you make. You know, I've had way too many students that had passion for the music, but made all the wrong choices. What good is that passion going to do you if you're not making the right choices? In fact, I'll go as far as to say the most passionate students I've ever had have been the worst students. I'm not saying the worst players, I'm saying the worst students. They get the least done. And I have to blame the passion. Not that we don't want to have passion, but don't let it interfere with the process. The process is a stoic one. You just take care of business, get it done. Then, when you're talking to people about your trumpet career, you can say, "Yes, I'm passionate." you know, let your passion for the music come out when you're talking to people, or when you're writing, or whatever, and when you're playing. But when it's time to get the job done, turn that bugger off, because it's not helping you. Turn it off. So, yes, he says, I see the passion comes after. That's right. The passion comes after, not during. I don't know how to pronounce this. Zalion. So Zalion says, hello, howdy, Zalion. I think we're finished here. We're 7 minutes over. Thank you guys for the good questions. Thanks for hanging out, and we will see you probably next week. I've got we've got a few weeks where we won't be doing this. We'll see. That's why we've got the WhatsApp, so that you know when we're going to have it and when we're not going to. If we don't have a Q&A, I will send you a message on WhatsApp that says we do not have a Q&A this week. Okay? I'll try to remember to do that. All right. Cardo says, thanks again, Andy. Have a great weekend. You guys have a great weekend. God bless you, and we will see you next time. Thank you.